Adam Smith. Yeah, you probably think you know the guy. Father of modern economics, right? The champion of self-interest, the invisible hand, and all that. But what if I told you the Adam Smith we all learned about is, well, only half the story? In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on his forgotten moral philosophy. And trust me, it might just change everything you thought you knew about capitalism.
Okay, so first things first. Let's tackle the popular image, the legend of Adam Smith that's been shaping our world for centuries.
When you hear his name, this is the book that pops into your head, isn't it? Came out in 1776 and it completely changed the game. It's where he gave us that famous line about the butcher and the baker, how they don't give us dinner because they're nice guys, but because they're looking out for themselves. And that one idea, it became the absolute bedrock of modern economics.
But hang on a second. Is that really it? Is that the whole picture? What if focusing on that one single idea is like looking at one piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle and saying, you know what the final image is? What if the Adam Smith we think we know is basically a caricature?
And this, right here, is where the plot twist comes in. Because before Adam Smith ever wrote about the wealth of nations, he wrote about something way more fundamental, the human heart. Let's talk about his first book, the one that's been gathering dust.
And this timeline just says it all, doesn't it? The Theory of Moral Sentiments came out in 1759. That's a full 17 years before his famous book on economics. This was his deep dive into our moral psychology, and it laid the entire groundwork for everything that came after.
Which leads to the obvious question, right? If this book is so foundational, so important, why is it basically a footnote today? Why do we only talk about the Adam Smith of economics and not the Adam Smith of morality?
Well, it seems like a few things happened. First, The Wealth of Nations was just such a smash hit that it cast a giant shadow over everything else he wrote. Then, the intellectual fashions changed. People got really into cold, hard reason, and Smith's ideas about feelings and sentiments kind of fell out of style. And as economics tried to become more of a hard science, it cut ties with its philosophical roots.
Okay, so let's get into the heart of this forgotten book. It all revolves around one single, incredibly powerful idea that Smith believed held all of human society together, and that idea is sympathy.
Now, let's be super clear. When Smith says sympathy, he doesn't just mean feeling sorry for someone. Not at all. For him, it was this deep, fundamental human ability to imagine our way into someone else's shoes, to actually feel what they're feeling, whether it's joy or anger or sadness. This, he said, is where our entire moral compass comes from.
And you can see it right here, in his own words. He's so precise. He says pity and compassion, those are for sorrow. But sympathy is for any passion. It's the universal human connector. It's the engine that drives his entire moral world.
So you might be thinking, okay, sympathy. That's a nice thought, but what on earth does it have to do with the dog-eat-dog world of the marketplace? Well, this is where it all connects.
See, Smith argued that self-interest can't just be a free-for-all. For a market society to actually work, that self-interest has to be guided by a set of virtues. He lays out this sort of hierarchy. You start with prudence, which is like smart self-interest that thinks about others. Then there's beneficence, which is actually going out and doing good. But the absolute, non-negotiable foundation, the pillar holding the whole thing up, is justice. The simple, unbreakable rule, do no harm.
And he really hammers this point home. Look at this quote. He says, we are tied, bound, and obliged to justice. Think about that. You can't force someone to be generous, right? That's a choice. But justice? Smith says society absolutely has the right to use force to make sure people follow the rules of justice, because without it, the whole thing just falls apart. So this all leads to the ultimate test of his philosophy, doesn't it? What happens when my personal gain clashes with the good of the community? In Adam Smith's world, which one is supposed to win? And his answer is a total mic drop. It completely shatters the myth. He says the wise and virtuous person, the ideal citizen, is always willing to sacrifice their own private interest for the public good. The community comes first, period. This is not the philosophy of pure, unadulterated greed. Not even close.
Okay, so, fascinating history. But why does a 250-year-old idea matter to us right here, right now? Why should we be digging up this forgotten philosophy today?
Because here's the absolute bottom line. Adam Smith never, ever said that greed is good. In fact, he argued the complete opposite. His vision for a free market wasn't some kind of moral vacuum. It was a system that could only work, could only thrive when it was built on a shared moral foundation of sympathy and, especially, justice. When you finally put his two great books together, you see the full picture. It's like a system, right? You need the dynamic engine of the market for sure, but that engine has to operate inside the sturdy chassis of a moral code. These virtues he talks about, they're not just nice little add-ons. For Smith, they are the essential bedrock for a free and prosperous society to even exist.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. You know, we're always looking for new fixes to today's problems. Inequality, corporate scandals, a lack of trust. But what if the blueprint for a better, more humane, more trusted form of capitalism was there all along, just waiting for us in the pages of a forgotten book written way back in 1759?